Welcome, everybody. I am Shivani. I am the founder and CEO of Ascend. We offer an online leadership program for women. And what inspired me to start Ascend and start these Fireside chat series was I used to be on many of your sides of tables. And so I used to own and lead different product and business initiatives at high growth startups like Intercom and large companies like PayPal. And when I moved up into leadership, I honestly learned how to get buy-in and lead by making a ton of mistakes. Some guidance, but primarily a ton of mistakes. And that's what led me to start the program. I want to empower women with the skills to move into leadership. And I think that is a big way that we see real change in the workplace, that we want to create the environments that we want to see. And to do that, I want to elevate more women into leadership. And so that's why I created Ascend's leadership program, the program that I wish I had access to when I was moving up into management. And really to help them grow. And we're doing it with women from companies like Facebook, LinkedIn, Slack, gaining confidence, being able to get buy-in, even from dominant personalities, and growing in their careers, including getting promoted. So much of the knowledge of how to move up comes from people who've already been there. And the program shaped so much from senior leaders who face the challenges that you face and have been able to overcome it. I think we need to have more real and honest conversations around what it takes to get into management. And that's why we do these fireside chats where we get to talk with successful women leaders and we get to learn about their journey and what are the things that we should be thinking about as we move up in our careers. With that, I am very excited to welcome Karen. Karen is the CEO of Intercom, and she is a board member at Dropbox, used to be a senior vice president at Intuit, has an MBA from Stanford. Very impressive career. That's an understatement. Karen, thank you so much for joining us. I'm excited for our conversation.
Thanks so much for inviting me, Shivani.
Yeah, of course. So today, Karen and I are going to chat for about 40 minutes, and then we're going to take questions from you. And so if you have questions, feel free to drop it. You'll see the Q&A icon that's at the bottom right of your screen. So you can add questions there and upvote them, and then at the end, we'll select questions from there. So Karen and I met when we both worked at Intercom. And, from the moment that I met her, I really admire her leadership style, always composed, always very charismatic and easy to work with. And I knew that I really wanted to have her on this fireside chat. So very much looking forward to our conversation. Karen, let's dive straight into it. I imagine when most people look at your resume and your achievements, they think you've gotten it all together, are super confident. I mean, you are the CEO of a successful company. Do you ever feel like an imposter? If so, how do you manage that self-doubt?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I'd say, first of all, I am not a fan of the term imposter syndrome. And that is because I think it is 100% normal to have some level of self-doubt and questioning. I certainly have that all the time, literally every day. I'm like, did I do that well? I could have done that better. Maybe that was like the wrong move here. What would be a better thing we could do here? I'm constantly asking myself those kinds of questions and thinking through how I could be better, how revisiting what I can learn from each thing that I do. And I think that by calling it imposter syndrome, it kind of sounds like, well, if you have some level of self-doubt or questioning, you've got this syndrome and a problem. And I would say I flip that on its head. If you do not have some level of questioning and self-doubt, who are you? Most people do. And so I actually think that we should normalize the whole concept of being open-minded, questioning. To me, that is the heart of the growth mindset, which I'm just such a big believer in. Always looking to learn and grow and take on new challenges, take on things that you don't know if you're going to be able to do. If you only go after problems you know you can solve, you're just limiting yourself in a massive way. And so if you're going after big problems you don't know if you can solve, by definition, you're going to have some moments of holy shit, am I going to be able to figure this out? Maybe this is too hard. Maybe, I won't figure it out this time. And that to me is a healthy level of just kind of pushing yourself and growing, and part of that growth mindset. One of the things that I do try to think about that may be useful for you all is to think about what parts of that questioning are serving me well and what parts of that are toxic. And there's usually some combination of the two. There's some part of that questioning which keeps you sharp, keeps you on your toes, keeps you working harder, keeps you pushing. And then there's probably some part of that which can be toxic, of like churning over the same issue and over again. Like that's not going to be helpful. Know when you've worked something enough times so you can just say, you know what, I made that decision. It's made it with the best information I had at the time. I'll revisit it again at X time. And between now and then, I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to work on something else. So I would just say, like, everybody has stuff going on beneath the surface. And if you think somebody's got their life together entirely, it's just because you don't know them well enough. So in short, yes, all the time. I definitely am always questioning and always feeling like I could be doing more or better, or I'm not sure how to take us to the next step, and then figure it out. And then I come up with that next ambitious plan from there that, need to get to figure out yet again.
That is such a refreshing perspective. Thank you for being so open and vulnerable right there. I think I can only imagine people hearing that right now, just such a relief around it. And I couldn't agree more with what you said. And I love how you called out, differentiate between what's the toxic part and what's actually pushing you forward. And because some level of discomfort is good, that means that you're pushing yourself. That means you're growing. And so I really love how you broke that down and how you approach it, and really clear takeaways for all of us to start embodying right away.
Good.
So let's dive into more of your leadership experience. I remember when you first joined Intercom, you pretty early on in that time frame gave me some great advice. We went on a walk and you gave me career advice, even though you were really busy. And that really stuck out to me because despite you being really busy, like you had no reason to like have this conversation. You carved out the time to, be there for me. And in every single meeting that I've been in with you for work, you always are very like focused on making sure everyone's opinions are heard, making sure people are comfortable, but still driving to a clear conclusion. So clearly you're a leader who really invests in building connections with your team and but at the same time, being comfortable with making sure things get done, making sure people are on track. And this is really important. But it's also a tension that many of the women in Ascend's leadership program feel. How do you balance direct versus likability?
Yeah, I think it's a great question.
Great. So I'd love to hear how you think about it. What are 1 to 2 actions that you take to balance that tension?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, I always have the mindset of, how do I bring out the best in others? How do I bring out the greatness that is there? How do I like see it? How do I amplify it? How do I, help that person do more than they ever thought was possible? And that's because I know I cannot do everything I want to do on my own. Like, it's just like, and life is more fun when you have a vibrant and amazing, like, diverse group of people around you. You can just do incredible things that no way any individual could do on their own. So I think to me, it starts with like just being excited to see what it is, what magic each person brings to the team, and what kind of new magic they can discover in themselves. And then I do think that being clear and being direct are very different than go hand in hand with kindness, and are very different from kind of false harmony. And I'll maybe break down a few of those pieces there. I think a lot of times it can feel uncomfortable to give somebody hard feedback, or to hold somebody accountable who hasn't done something they said they were going to do and they needed to do, and they just didn't do it, or didn't do it in the kind of the right way or right time, or whatever that was. I actually think longer term. And part of how I think about this is, it is fundamentally more unkind to not tell that person how you actually feel, to hide it, and to like let it sit in the back of your mind, like pissing you off, day after day, or making you like go around them and have somebody else do whatever. Like, that's not helping them grow. That's not helping them in their career. And it's also unkind to like everybody else on the team. So even if you're like, one of your values is kindness to others, like, that does not mean ducking hard conversations. That's not kind. That's exactly the opposite of that. And so make sure you're not solving for short-term harmony, and make sure you're not solving for what is like most comfortable for you in the moment, and that you're really solving for what's going to be best for this person over time, what's going to be best for my company over time. How do I help this person be their best and the whole team be their best? It is terrible if you let underperformers kind of sit there in your team, everyone else in your team is like, wow, she doesn't care about that. Looks like that's not a problem. They're either going to leave or be pissed off about it. So just think a little bit longer term, and it starts to make it all a little bit more clear. And then when you're talking to the person, there's different ways to hold people accountable and to give difficult feedback. And it doesn't have to be like, wow, you really messed this up. How come you always da 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 da? It can be more like, come around to their side of the table, like, hey, we had agreed that you were gonna, do the updated forecast by last Wednesday. Here's why we needed that. And here's the problem that it caused because we didn't have that. What can we, like, what happened? What can we do differently so that this doesn't happen the next time? So kind of approach it with a sense of respect for the other person. And I oftentimes, when I'm giving feedback, will kind of almost mentally imagine getting up and walking around to the other side of the table and sitting next to that person and thinking about, like, if my only goal was to help this person be most successful, how would I talk to them? And think like, well, that's actually probably the best way to talk to them. And so to me, it's about giving the right direct feedback in a way that people can hear and best act on, but it's never about ducking the uncomfortable truths or ducking feedback or accountability.
I love that reframing around, when you tell the truth, you're actually helping people. It's unkind to not tell the truth. That's so much in line with, in the leadership program, we talk a lot about giving difficult feedback, and we talk about a lot of the things that actually, in fact, you talked about right now, which is perfect. And so we break down, what are the steps to go do it? What should you be saying in these conversations? And one of the questions I always pose back to reflect on is, when you avoid giving a piece of difficult feedback, are you holding back on it because you don't want to hurt your feelings or the other person's feelings?
Yes, I think oftentimes people hold back because they're uncomfortable and they're worried about the conflict. And I even sometimes still feel that way. I'm like, I've done this so many times of like, okay, let's put down whatever concern I have and figure out how I can communicate this in a way that the other person can best understand. And let me think about everybody else on the team and then go forward from there.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, exactly. Like when you share that feedback, you're actually helping that person grow. I've been guilty of holding back on feedback because they were so nice and I didn't want to hurt their feelings. But later when it gets like escalated, then they're just like, why didn't anyone just tell me this sooner? And I felt so embarrassed. And that was such a pivotal moment. I was like, you have to give feedback. And, all the tactics you talked about, like giving it in a way that people know that you've good intentions and feel supported through it. I love all that. Diving more into your leadership experience, let's talk about how you motivate teams. That's another big topic that we break down in Ascend's leadership program and what's involved in that. So what are 1 to 2 actions you take to motivate your team, especially because your team is big, like, you're leading an entire company and with so many different stakeholders and needs. So how do you think about that?
Yeah. And it's even different in this time. Like normally I'm seeing people and talking to them live and in person. We've got 5 different offices across Intercom, but I can get out to each of them somewhat regularly, and in our larger offices, I'll see them quite often. So in this time, it's particularly important to think about that. I always start by thinking about our mission and vision and making sure we're really talking about that a lot. So at Intercom, our mission is to make internet business personal. And we very much believe that better relationships with your customers leads to business growth. And so we're all about making internet business personal and building strong customer relationships. So starting with that mission and vision, sharing why that matters, and then getting very specific on like, okay, where are we going and what's our strategy to get from here to there? And then sharing transparently points on the board, like here are our goals, here's where we did hit, here's where we didn't. So to me, part of motivating teams is like setting where you're going, making sure that's like exciting and clear on the why, and then being really transparent on how you get from here to there and how you're doing on that. And I think it's equally as important to like sharing wins is always really exciting. But where I think you get a lot of credibility is when you share the losses, like what failed, what didn't work as well as you wanted it to, what did you learn from that, and what are you going to do differently? Because everybody knows that you're not perfect in every way, and no company is hitting every single one of their goals every single day and quarter. And so just being like transparent there, I think helps motivate teams of like, oh, we can fail and not get fired. We can fail and learn from that and do new, big, powerful things from there. And this is a leader who's not going to like bullshit us. We're going to have real conversations. I always think about something that the former CEO of Intuit, who's a mentor of mine, Brad Smith, talked about, which is winning hearts and minds. And thinking about all of us, like we all make decisions with some combination of like our hearts or our emotion, and then kind of like the logical, rational part of it all. And so I think when you motivate teams, you need to always be thinking about both of those. Like, what's that emotional connection that plays to the heart? And then what's the practical, tactical points on the board side that wins minds? And then I think also just being clear on what's in it for them. Like, what do you personally get out of us achieving this mission and achieving all of these goals? Where's the personal development and goal and growth for you? And I think that's important both in like broad settings, but also in one-on-one conversations with managers. And I think the last thing that I always try to keep in mind is leading from principles and values, and making sure that all of the decisions that I make tie back to my principles, my values, that I'm very explicit about those, and that I stick to those values both in good times and in hard times, because I always believe that a measure of a person is some combination of what they do when they think no one else is watching and what they do in hard times. So really making sure that you have clear values and principles and talking about those and living to those.
I love that. All the things that you just broke down right there. And I'm curious, as you're, because you have so many different groups that you're socializing with, and I think often people need to hear the message multiple times. How do you communicate your message? Or is there a certain format that you find works well, or is it really just varying up depending on the situation?
Yeah, I think it's good to communicate the message in multiple different ways because everyone learns differently. For example, at Intercom, one of the things that we do is we do an all hands every 2 weeks. And that's actually a lot. And we've been doing it like super regularly, especially through the pandemic, and making sure they are like very well thought through in terms of like, updates to let's get back to our mission and vision and talk about what that is for all the new people who've joined. Let's talk about our sharpened strategy, where we're going. Let's talk about our progress there, where we're winning, where we're not. So I'm a believer in regular all hands. And so we do those, for example, every 2 weeks. And I also think it's helpful we also do regular show and tells where every single week, we believe that shipping is the heartbeat of our company, and we're always building and shipping and learning there. And so showing then what we're actually shipping and then how that ties to our mission and our vision and our strategy. It's kind of like, oh, here's a different way of thinking about it. It's product demos and how those tie to our strategy. And then we also have customers come in. So for example, next week at our all hands, later this week at our all hands, we're having 3 Intercom customers come, and I'm going to interview them and hear more about their experiences in choosing Intercom and what they love and what they wish for, and what else is going on in their world, how our product connects in with all the other things that we do or that they do. And I think that's important. So kind of hearing the message in lots of different ways, like from customers' point of view, from a product point of view, from like a tops-down strategy point of view. I also like to have lots of different people communicate. So it's not just me saying the same thing over and over again. Where I can, I like to tell stories. And then I like to get other people across the company helping to share kind of what this means for them and what they're actually doing. I think doing a combination of both all hands. I also like doing like fireside chat type conversations. I also do skip level roundtable conversations where I meet with like groups of 10 or 12 folks, and I just hear what's on people's minds, what's working, what isn't, and that's more of kind of like me getting information back versus like kind of sharing out. And I like to have very open Q&A. So in most of the all hands that we do, we open it up for Q&A just live at the end across our 600 folks in 5 locations. And that's worked really well. Slack has been awesome for us during the pandemic because we've got people who are just writing in questions, who are sharing like commentary, cheering each other on live in real time, kind of like this chat window right here. But, even more vibrant with tons of like ridiculous GIFs and emojis and things like that. So it's super fun.
I remember those gifts and emojis during the all hands. They're always super fun and like.
And they're now like 10x. Like we're
Yeah.
like hundreds of those every single all hands, which is awesome.
I can only imagine. That sounds really great. And, as we talk more about kind of building off that, and I see some questions coming in around driving alignment, what do you do? Like, what's one recommendation you have when the person you're trying to drive alignment to is just not coming on board? They're not listening to you. You feel like you've tried these different communication channels. You've brought in the customer stories and still not working. Like, is there any advice you'd have for us? One action that we can think about taking in that situation?
I think it's maybe first start by trying to understand like why. Like, do they have an alternative idea of something that they think you should be doing instead of what you're doing? And why do they think that would be better? And going into that conversation with a truly open mind, not as in like, I'm right, I just need to convince them, but also not the other way of like, I'm sure they're right and I'm wrong. And, I just need to kind of like figure out why I was wrong. Like going in with like a truly open mind of like, I bet there's something in here that they know or think that's going to be useful for us as a company. So I'd love to, and for me, so I'd love to better learn. And I bet there's some things that I can share with this person. So I think just going in with like a really, truly open-minded attitude of understanding what is their concern, what's their alternative proposal, how different is it from what you're proposing? Like sometimes there's just a lot of like, I don't want to do this because I'm worried about all of these things. And then you get into the like, okay, well, yeah, those things are going to be hard and those are reasonable to be worried about those things. We could do nothing. Like what other alternative path would you suggest? Like, do you think we'd be better off just like not addressing this problem? Like, well, no, we can't, we got to do something here. Like, okay, great. Well, what other path could we go down? And so kind of working that person to like a more constructive path of like, is there some alternative idea that they have? And if so, like what information do they have that makes them think that would be significantly better? It's good to just understand. And then at some point you have to get to a place where you've gotten all the facts and ideas on the table, you get input from other people, and then you just have to figure out like how you're going to actually make the decision. I'm a big fan of the DACY framework. The D being there's a driver for a decision, and A being there's an approver for the decision, the C being there's a set of contributors to it, and I being a set of people who are informed. So at some point, if there's a big decision to be made, you just got to get clear on like, okay, what's the decision we're going to make? Who's going to drive it? Who's going to contribute? Those people who are contributing are not getting a veto vote. And then who's going to approve it? And then I believe in the concept of disagree and commit. Like at some point you have to just make a call and move on and agree maybe when you're going to check back in, or in what circumstances would you want to circle back and do something different. But I think it really starts by understanding where they're coming from. And most of the time, there's actually more shared ground there than you might imagine.
Yeah, I 100% agree. That makes a lot of sense. Now, switching gears a bit, let's talk about your career overall, especially when we think about career growth. And I would imagine many people listening in today have questions around how to grow their career. And a popular conversation always comes up around mentorship. So if someone asked you about getting a mentor and how to go about it, what advice would you have for them around mentorship?
Yeah, so I think the first piece of advice I'd have is think more about your own inner voice, and figuring out a place and a space to be able to listen to that, to cultivate that and grow that, versus assuming you're going to get the answers from somebody else. The answers are all within you. It's like Dorothy from the Wizard of Oz, like all along what she realized was that, all along she had it in her. And it doesn't just apply to women, obviously. Like all along, I think we have so much more in each of us than we ever imagine. And part of what a mentor can do is help unlock that and give permission to that. But I would say, like, figure out how you can spend time just kind of listening to yourself. Like, what's your own instinct tell you? What is it that you really wish for? I like to try to spend time doing some amount of meditation. I use like Headspace or Calm, just even like 10 minutes a day. I find incredibly helpful to just get that like clarity of where I'm going and why and what matters and what doesn't matter, in that perspective. I also do think it's helpful to have external mentors, but I've never been someone who's like, oh, I've got this one mentor and that person's going to like pull me through their entire, my entire career. And they've just hopped from like company to company doing like these amazing things. And I've gotten to like follow along behind. I think that's a little bit of like a knight in shining armor. Like, yeah, you can sit around and wait for that, or you can like create your own set of mentors who's an interesting group of people that you learn from, and really like be your own hero, be your own mentor. And so for me personally, I have a series of folks who I just deeply respect and really care about, who I learn from and who I talk to on different topics, but not people who I'm meeting with like every single week, who I would consider like a formal mentor with a capital M. So I'd say, you know, go out and find people who you like relate with and resonate with, and don't ask for like, let's have lunch every single month. Like, it's kind of like jumping from like dating to marriage. Like, whoa, can we just like have lunch and have be fun? And if we click, then we can have lunch another time, at a time where you have a specific topic you want to talk about. So I think just finding people who you really connect with and relate to, and when you have a specific topic you want to talk about with them, reaching out, as well as just kind of keeping them in the loop on what's going on in your career and the things that you're doing. And make sure to figure out how you can reciprocate. What can you do to help the person? What is it that you uniquely know that maybe that other person doesn't know as much, to make sure there's a little bit of a give back. Even if you're just offering and there's nothing you ever do back for the person, I still think it's a nice sign of a two-way relationship.
I love that. And I think one thing that comes to mind right there is also just following up with them and letting them know how things went. So
Yes.
often, very rarely do I get a message back and be like, this is what happened. And thank you for this. And this is how it played out. I think that's really meaningful. And I know I completely agree with you how you're talking about like mentorship is not the only thing that's required. Like, don't let that hold you back. And I find that, like, at least for myself, I can pick up so much just by observing the person in the meeting or in their interactions, how they communicate, how do they remain composed during a tough situation. And you don't even need that mentor or that senior leader's buy-in for you to learn from them. And then once you get that learning, like, go ahead and like message them and be like, hey, I really admire this about you, and I've been observing. And I think that's going to be, one, they're going to appreciate that, and two, like, maybe that could be opening of the relationship. Obviously do it in a very authentic manner, but you don't need to wait for that person to have time to mentor you.
Yeah, exactly. And like, so here's a perfect example. I met and got to know Meg Whitman through the board of Dropbox. And as I was thinking about stepping into the CEO role at Intercom and taking over from the founder who I'd worked with for several years, I was kind of thinking about like, who are people who have are, you know, incredibly successful CEOs who have taken over from founders, and maybe there's some things that I could learn from them. And so I reached out to Meg. I was like, oh, she's never been like a formal mentor. She's got a lot of other things going on, but I reached out to see whether she'd be up for having a conversation. We ended up chatting for like an hour and a half on a Saturday, and it was incredibly useful. And she was just like super direct and open, and it was terrific. And so finding sometimes like a particular topic is a good way to kind of have something that's useful for you and energizing for the person that you're chatting with.
That's great. That's really great. Now, my favorite question that we ask in every session is, let's talk about failures, especially because, you know, we often celebrate successes. We pretty much only celebrate successes, and we never talk about the failures. But as we both know, failure is just part of the journey to get the success. So I'd love to hear, what's a failure that you've had and what have you learned from it? And before we dive into that question, just a reminder to everybody, if you have more questions, throw it into the Q&A, so bottom right icon. And then right after this question, we'll start taking questions from there. So you can add questions and upvote anything that you really want Karen to answer. So Karen, let's hear about your failure.
Oh yes, I've had many failures. I'll share with you one example that I think is probably particularly relevant for a number of folks here. So I had been at Intuit for a number of years and started in product management, and then spent a lot of time in marketing and design, and loved every single function. And I was really excited and ready to become a general manager. And I just knew that was like the right next career step for me. And I thought, you know what, I bet I'm going to even be better as a general manager than I was at any of these other like functions. I love product. But I just was like, this is the job for me. And the GM of my business left, and I was like, oh, wow, like this is the moment I should like put my hat in the ring. But I was, a little bit nervous about it, but, put my hat in the ring and said, I really want to do this. And here's why. And the person who was the hiring manager for the job, who's like the, number 2 person at the company, was like, it's so great that you're putting your hat in the ring. So often people don't do that. And so I thought like, this is terrific. We had a couple of conversations and I did not get the job. And someone else got the job who's terrific. And I ended up working for them for a little while and then moving to a next role. And I definitely was like, should I leave? I didn't get the job. And I was like, no, I think I think there's a lot of room for me to grow and there's opportunity here. So I'm going to stay. I think that's going to be a good thing for me and I'm going to learn a lot. And then about maybe 6 months, maybe 12 months later, I don't quite remember. I get this email announcing 2 new general managers. Congratulations, so-and-so and so-and-so to being the general manager of this and the general manager of this. Like the company only had like, I don't know, maybe like 6 or 8 general managers, like not a lot. And to have 2 new positions come up when I had specifically wanted to be a general manager, felt like I was as qualified as the folks who got that and wasn't actually even included in the conversation. Like I didn't even know these were going to be positions created. And I wasn't then involved in any kind of like discussions around it. I just felt like, like that's just a massive step back. Like I said, I wanted to do this and you didn't even consider me. And so I was totally pissed off. And I thought about like, should I just leave, whatever it is. And so part of my advice here is I think patience will pay off. And so I went and talked to the kind of number 2 and number 3 people at the top couple of people at the company who were the ones who had all of these roles and basically explained like, hey, I really want to be a general manager. I know I'm ready. Here are all the reasons why. And furthermore, the thing I added to the conversation that I hadn't said last time was I want to be the next general manager here. So when the next role opens up, I want to be the first call that you make. And both of the folks looked at me and they smiled and they're like, okay, you're very clear. And I was like, great. It was probably like 2 months later, I was indeed their first call, and I did end up becoming a general manager. This was a general manager of the employee management solutions business, which is the payroll business at Intuit, which is about, when I got it, was about a $600 million in revenue business. So, big business to get to be the full GM of. And it was exactly the job for me. I loved doing that. It was like what I'm best at, being a GM, being a CEO, like those all kind of like tie together. And in fact, what ended up happening is of that group of people who were promoted to GM, like the first person, the next 2 people and me, my division had the highest beat to the plan in terms of growth and the highest employee engagement. And I ended up being the first one promoted to senior vice president, which was the level above that. So I think some of the lessons and takeaways there are don't ask, don't get. So put out there what you are looking for, what you want. But also know that you're not going to get a lot of the things that you ask for, and like have the emotional maturity to talk yourself down off the ledge of like whatever anger and frustration you feel, and hang in there and be productive and like use that as a learning opportunity. And don't be bummed when that doesn't happen immediately. Know that like life is long, careers are long. And a second kind of takeaway in there, I would say, is no only means no for now. Like, feel free, keep going back. Like persistence is where it's at.
That's an amazing story. Very powerful takeaways right there. It especially resonates with me because my guiding principle is you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So always ask. And so what you're saying right now really, really resonates with me. To be honest, I was hesitant to reach out to you to ask you to join our Fireside chat. I was really nervous going into it. I was like, you're so busy, you're really senior. But then I was like, you know what, let me just ask. I think as long as I ask in a respectful way, the worst case that happens is you say no, but at least I know the answer. And you were kind enough to say yes and join us. And this has been a great conversation. And so what you're saying,
I really believe in you and your vision and what you're doing here. So it was actually a no-brainer for me. And I was excited to get to chat with you about all this.
That's so kind. Thank you so much. That means so much to me. And I've loved like all the advice and experiences you've shared right here. Why don't we take some questions from the group? I see a lot of questions coming in. So I can tell people are also like really enjoying what you're saying and are ready to keep diving in more and more and more. So one of the questions I see is around your leadership style and figuring out like, how did you figure out what kind of leader you wanted to be as you were starting out as an IC and moving up? And I think this question is really fitting because I know this is a popular topic. In the leadership program, we talk a lot about your personal brand and figuring out what does your leader want to be? How do you want to be a leader? And so how did you think about what you want to be known for?
Yeah, I mean, I really wanted to always be kind of the same person internally as externally, and be the kind of person that I could be proud of, the kind of person that I would want to work for. And so I very much focus on being genuine and real, on being ambitious and going after big things that like make a difference in the world and are, you know, game changing for individuals and for teams, and doing that in a way that is like kind and respectful, and really I seek to bring out the best in everybody around me. So those are some of my principles, and it's really thinking about like who am I on my best days, and how can I make sure that I'm that on all of my days,
Yeah.
or most of them.
Yeah, fair enough. And do you feel like, you know, what you seek to be as a leader, do you think that's shifted over time? Or is that something you can embody at any level, and just how you actually embody it, or what actions you take might shift based on your role and seniority?
I think you could probably get more clear on it over time, like the boldness of the things that I go after, my ambitiousness for us, for my team and for my company has definitely like grown over the years as I've realized like all that's possible. And so I think you can like shift it and develop it a little bit. And you can also then see when you see other leaders that you particularly admire, or people that you work with who you might think like, ooh, that's really not how I want to be. I think you can hone it, but it's probably pretty true to your core. I just had my last year, my 25th college reunion, just to totally date myself. And it was just amazing how many of the things were still true about me now that were then. So it's like, wherever you go, there you are. You can just keep working on being a better and better version of yourself.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That sounds really great. One of the questions I've seen here, which I think is really great, around what do you do when people don't take you seriously? That's another topic that people don't talk about enough, but many of us struggle with that. I know I definitely have. So in situations when you go in and people aren't taking you seriously, what's an action you take to change that behavior and get that respect that you deserve?
Yeah, I try to do things that are both like physical and mental. I don't mean that I arm wrestle people, but I try to sit up taller, speak louder, make sure that my point is heard, and that if someone's going to talk over me in a repeated manner, that's not going to continue. One way or another, and I'll call it out in the moment of, oh, actually, you know, I was still speaking there, or actually I have another point to make there, or, oh, just a moment, I'll get you, but let me finish out what I'm going to say here. So I do think you teach people how to treat you, and so don't settle for somebody like dismissing you or not taking you seriously. Do ask other people for help. I don't at all mean like, hey, it's your problem if somebody dismisses you. But I would say like, stand up for yourself, be your own ally. Think about what you would do if someone was doing that to one of your friends. Sometimes it's easier to be kind of aggressive, or sometimes it's easier to kind of be an advocate for someone else than for yourself, and then try to be that advocate for yourself, and feel free to ask other people for help in there too. I'll also, if I feel like someone's not taking me seriously, I might just pull in some like credibility things and start talking about kind of details or specifics on the business, of like, okay, if you want to go like toe to toe with me on like trying to poke holes in what I'm going to say, I'm more than happy to get into that mode, and we'll just go back and forth until you're like, okay, you're a reasonable fighter. And sometimes that's just the way some people interact, where they just like, they need to test you to see whether like, are you going to be resilient? And so you can view it as a little bit of a game of like, okay, like this time I'm going to show like this, like strong, like part of me where we spar back and forth on this topic, and I'm going to try to have some fun with it too. So I think about like how you can change your attitude about it to feel like it's like fun or an interesting opportunity to practice something, and have a deep faith and confidence in yourself along the way.
I love that. Those are all really practical tips. I think that is easy to implement, and especially around, think about what would you tell a friend? Because you're right. Like, we're often like much harder on ourselves than we are on other people.
Yep.
And then, so think about yourself from a third party perspective, and then actually go do the things that you just talked about.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. So one last question from here, and then I have a final question for you. Okay. So I see a recommendation around like, what leadership books do you read? So any recommendations for the group?
Yeah. Some of the books that I have read recently, I love the Growth Handbook by Elad Gil. That's less of like a specific leadership handbook, and more just kind of about starting up businesses. I think The Hard Thing About Hard Things is always a good one from Ben Horowitz, especially when you're like a CEO of a tricky tech company. One of the books that probably my favorite new book that I read new to me book that I read last year is How to Be an Anti-Racist. And that to me was just a real eye-opener in terms of some of the things that I thought I was doing to be an advocate for others were really not enough. And I was inadvertently supporting the status quo more than I had realized. And I needed to actually take more action to be anti-racist. And if you don't, you actually end up supporting the status quo and then by default actually being racist. So that to me was a big one. A classic that I love is Growth Mindset by Carol Dweck, which I just think everyone should read that book or read at least parts of that, and know that you can tackle hard things, and that's how your brain grows. And like it's just like it's sports. Like your brain is a muscle. The harder things you go after, the more you can do. And to stop stepping back because of fear of failure, and instead like embrace the challenge because you get stronger through it.
Yeah, I love that. That is also one of my favorite books, and it helps me think about like, what's the worst case situation that can happen. Usually, the worst case is actually not that bad. And so, final question for you is, what's one piece of career advice that you would give to us before we wrap up today's call?
Yeah, let's see. I'll even share two things if you don't mind.
I love that.
I would say, what would you do right now if you knew for certain that your hard work and persistence and resilience over the years and over the long term of your life and career were going to work out well for you? Not that you're going to get every single thing you go for, but if you just know that like, hey, if I work hard and I'm resilient, I'm persistent, I'm a good person, it's going to work out for me. What would you do differently? Like, what would you be freed up to do? What would you not be afraid to going for? And so just say like, assume that it is going to work out. Assume that you're going to, in the long term, get what you want. Go for it, and don't hold yourself back in that way. And have a feeling of like many ways to win, abundance, like all is possible for you. And the second thing I would say is, one of the things that I've learned and read through a couple of different books is that the greatest predictor of your future happiness is your happiness today. So if you just think about that for a moment, the takeaway from that is figure out how to be happy in your current situation. Make the most of it. Seize the day. Don't wait for that like next big job or that great mentorship conversation or that big promotion or whatever it is. Like, figure out how to be happy in this moment and how to be like your best. It's like very much a carpe diem, seize the day. And that will drive, I think, both happiness and future success as well. So ask for what you want. Go for it. Don't hold yourself back, and figure out how to be your best in today's moment.
Those are amazing. That greatest predictor of future happiness is your happiness today definitely made me pause and think. I'm like, you're so right. But I think, at least for myself and some people I know, we always make the excuse we're working towards future happiness. But things never get easier for the most part. So it's learning like, how are you satisfied with what you have instead of always trying to look beyond what you have already achieved.
Exactly. Exactly.
I really love that. These are amazing, Karen. I am honored to have you in this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. For everybody, throw your favorite takeaway in the chat. I think there's so many. I think for me, it's what Karen just shared around, your future happiness. Your current happiness determines your future happiness. But we talked about imposter syndrome, motivating teams, how do you drive alignment, the tension between direct and likability, failure, mentorship. So throw your favorite takeaway in the chat. Winning hearts and minds. What would you do if you knew everything would work out? Don't solve for the short-term harmony, getting out of your own way. Love the happiness quote, a female workout. I love all these takeaways. Motivating teams and going for it. These are really great. Karen, thank you again. And thank you to everybody for your great questions, enthusiasm. I love the conversation happening in the chat. If you found today's chat really helpful and you want to dive deeper into these topics and want to develop the skills to be able to lead and get buy-in, and you want to learn with a group of women who are like you, high caliber but low ego, then I'd love to invite you to join Ascend's leadership program. The program starts on March 1st and goes until April 6th. And I'm really excited for how the program is shaping up. The cohort is just amazing. We have women from Google and Amazon, Salesforce, Slack, Intercom, Peloton, DoorDash, and many more companies. So we're going to drop the link in the chat. If you want to apply, we have a few spots left. And when you apply, you can mention the Fireside chat so we can expedite your application. And with that, we will follow up with the recording and takeaways. Karen, thank you again. This has been very insightful and truly a joy just chatting with you right now.
So great to see you too, Shivani. Thank you for all that you are doing to inspire future leaders.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone. Stay well and take care.
Thanks for joining.